So overall, how would you rate installing solar for the first time ever in a huge, massive system?
Yeah, I think like we are pretty comfortable with like larger kind of construction type projects. I think the thing that was different, of course, with this is just we don't have a knowledge base in all the calculations, right, to figure out what size system and all of that. So that was a bit of learning. It's pretty straightforward. Wasn't too bad. I think also we're pretty comfortable with like the physical nature of lifting stuff up and all that, which was great and super fun. And then overall, our experience, we dealt exclusively with Signature Solar was excellent. They're so helpful to work with. Any question that we had, we could give them a call. And as you know, sometimes when you call companies, you can be on the phone forever. They don't pick up. It was, on the order of
minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty instant. So it was so nice. And anytime we had questions, specifically Daniel as well, was able to speak with folks that were really, really helpful to go through, whether it was commissioning or, we had the system that we wanted to do the 75 kilowatt hours and having the 5 batteries and 2 inverters, sorting that out together. Someone was always really willing to help. So we're so grateful and want to thank Signature Solar for being so great.
So like, tell people I'm doing the solar stuff. I mean solar stuff.
Hold on to this, I'll bring it up.
What is it?
Just make sure it doesn't fall off and let it open it. Can you say what they were?
No. Which, I don't know what, I don't know what you do to mentally do that, I understand it. Narrate?
Yep.
Yep.
Or you need to narrate.
I know you should narrate while we're. Okay, we just popped out the bottom.
Okay. We're about to do our last cable into the battery. They come shrink wrapped, and we took the shrink wrapper off, and then it has this little piece, so you can just take this little piece off. I normally spiral it off with my hands. The trick is, ooh, this one might not work, is it tends a Christmas tree out, or kind of like splay out. So you have to take it and like spin it, and really squeeze on it, and spin it, and squeeze, to try to get this tip a little bit tighter to be able to fit back into here. And then if you have any stray hairs, like we had a couple of stray hairs that want to attach, so you just pull those out. And then if you can get underneath it and watch it go in, you'll be able to see if it fits. Sometimes I'll add a little twist too to help it kind of spiral in. And then we're going to tuck those last ones. And move that. And then I just hand tighten it first. And then after I hand tighten it, there's a torque wrench to 164 inch-pounds, which we figured out was like 16.4 Newton meters.
Alright, so we're on the roof looking at the old array for the whole house. These are 160 watt panels. They're 28.9 volts VOC and 7.5 amps. Clearly polycrystalline, and I think they're vintage 2000, something like that.
Early 2000.
Yeah, early 2000. And this gives you a good comparison of how much bigger these Donny panels are at 535 watts compared to
Because this is one panel.
the old ones.
There's
Yeah.
no space versus that.
And so these are connected as like 5 strings, and then there's a combiner box behind there, and the whole thing is something I've never seen before, but you know, it's literally bolted to the roof, and then in the back, you know, it's got structural support and then cables that are very, very seriously bonded to the structure of the house, because there are some really, really whipping winds that come through here, and with this, you know, really high inclination array, it's more than an airplane wing, and it survived for over 25 years. We can zoom in on this panel, I hope.
What?
Yeah, they're Kyocera panels, and I don't know. 2003. 2003. Still trucking. Alright, so we've got the old system here. Okay, so PV is coming down from the roof. 2 very old Xantrax inverters, which are now Schneider inverters. There's a disconnect here, and then an outback charge controller, and then a couple other disconnects. So in terms of code, I don't know if anything would pass for this installation. You know, we've got DC wire not in conduit. There's a connection that was made that's taped. So code is not enforced, clearly. And then these are his old batteries, which are their old batteries, excuse me. Energentech Solar, 3 of them. It's 45 kilowatt hours, is that right?
They're 10 each. So
Oh,
30
10.
total.
Okay, so 30. So they're going from 30 to 75.
And it used to take us, we could make about 8 to the most like 12 kilowatt hours a day. On the
8
whole
to
system.
12 kilowatt hours a day.
And so we normally would either break even or have to run a generator like once a week, and this was like, can't run the dishwasher in the same week as the washing machine, technically.
Okay.
So.
2 medical doctors. You can't run the dishwasher. Okay. And then this is kind of the old connection to the house. So it's only, what, 6 gauge wire going into the house. It's all tied off. And then here's the new connection that's coming through the wall, through the garage, and the inverters are over there. We've got, if we look, we've got 75 kilowatt hours of EG4 EG4 batteries, the indoor rated ones, and then 2 of the 18K inverters. And I think this is the first parallel system that might be on YouTube, because we were not able to find parallel systems in the video. So let's begin. They did the vast majority of the work by far, including installing the panels on their roof, disconnecting their old off-grid system, which we'll show you later, and then also clearly installing this wall of batteries. And there's a whole bunch of back and forth on how we can do this and not disconnect them from power for more than, say, half an hour while that main connection was made. And then also a lot of back and forth with EG4 because we did not, in the instruction manual, a 5 battery system was not listed. And so we can go ahead and explain some of that. We went back and forth with EG4 on how to actually hook this up.
Yep.
So what are the battery configurations, if you can remember?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it sounds like maybe some of the discussion in the beginning, because they showed the 4 batteries with the 2 inverters, was the fact that the internal bus bar I think is rated to 250, and there was some concern maybe with the 5th battery that could push that. But after speaking a bunch, and this was Daniel could probably speak to this, with folks there, it was decided that this wouldn't be a big problem. So then our next kind of step in terms of the inverter with that and figuring out stuff with the inverter is just making sure we size the wires. Within the last 6 months, so it is late October 2024. So 6 months prior, the wiring diagram that's available on the manual site for EG4 changed, and we can kind of bring you through that for some of the wiring size that dictated our combiner box here. But in terms of the challenging, besides figuring out wire size, I think for the inverter was just understanding really that 2 inverters require an AC junction box, as well if you have a generator as a generator junction box. So
This is the generator one, and this is our AC combiner one.
Yeah.
but I think
So
that
currently we don't have the generator hooked up yet properly. That is part of the next phase, in addition to installing the final solar arrays. But in terms of the batteries, right? So the 2 cables coming from this master inverter go to this battery, okay, right? And then
that's 2 positives. Yeah.
yep, and then 1 cable goes to the battery on the left, and then 1 cable goes to the battery on the right. And then it's a purely symmetric system. So the second inverter, the battery goes, 2 cables go down to the main battery beneath it, and then 1 cable goes to the left and 1 cable goes to the right. So that is the way that we thought it should work, but it wasn't in the manual, so we had to make sure that would be okay. So there's a total of over 20 kilowatts. They're the Adani 535.
535, and the bifacial 650. Yep.
Bifacial 650. Those are huge panels, huge. And you're going to see from photos, perhaps videos later, of them installing them on their ultra steep, very slippery metal roof. So that's 25 kilowatts of PV, separated into 4 strings, right?
Yep.
Each string is 10 panels,
Correct.
all provided by Signature Solar. And so currently we have 3 of those strings hooked up, and there's an old array that I will show you that we're gonna retrofit with the new panels. Very old array.
2004.
Yeah.
Old.
And so remind me, which strings are active right now?
Yep. So on again, this is the master. Do you want me to do it?
Yeah.
So A and we have it listed as A and B based on our sketching that we did here. So these 2 are both active, and then on the secondary inverter that we have, again, 2 of those that were active. One of the things we kind of thought through and tried to figure out with setting this up, if y'all remember, the first charge controller has a different kind of maximum amperage it can take. I believe it's like 31 is the maximum amperage. We should double check that for the first, and then the remaining 2, I believe, 19 and 19. So we tried to think through a little bit in terms of the only difference we have is on one of our arrays, there's probably a bit more bifacial exposure that we may get a bit more higher wattage from. So we tried to plug that one into the first slot, which again kind of has that higher maximum. 31.
Yeah, and because these panels are so big, they have pretty high current ratings compared to, it's like 11 amps instead of 9 to 10.
Exactly.
So we're really pushing the limits in terms of, the 25% rule for when clouds go over. Okay, we got a kiddo. Okay, we're going to take a break for a second.
All right, so yeah, we chose this kind of solar disconnect. I think it's dowel or something that we chose as a break between where our PV comes through and then to the inverter. So our system, which you'll see in a minute, is of course we have all the cables from the PV coming into a PV disconnect. Also, we've got a Signature Solar that's in the back that you'll see in a minute. Comes through the house here. This is an 1.25 inch conduit, and then from in the house we came into this disconnector switch as a secondary. The reason why we did this is there's some protection from our amperage. As Daniel mentioned before, we're a little bit close on our current coming into each one of the charge controllers. So what we did was we actually bought this and switched out these breakers so that they have a maximum current. So this has a maximum current of 30, which corresponds to our maximum current of 31 on one of the charge controllers. We have 2 of those 30s and 2 15s that we've run through. So that is below our amount. So if we ever exceeded that, we weren't sure exactly what the fuse system was for the charge controller, so this will trip before that point. It also has some kind of lightning arrest as well if there's I guess an arrest current in there built in.
And they don't make a 19 amp, which is why we couldn't get like kind of the exact amperage. They make more, and we didn't want to have a breaker that was more. So if it's 20 amp, then the inverter's going to get more amperage than it can handle first. So that's why we went with the 15 here. And so far, we haven't had any issues with it. We've had some pretty sunny days.
And what it looks like on the inside here, we pop this off. You want to see it? So again, the PV array comes down, goes to a solar disconnect, mounted on the outside of the house, easily accessible to first responders or whatnot that it may be. From there, it comes into the house here and then through. So this is in a 4 string, if you will. So there's, if you look, there's 16 coming through that we have. Each one of these, so of course with the strings corresponds with each one of the breaker, and then it leaves here, goes into the inverters on both sides.
And we have this one off because this is the final array that we haven't exchanged yet. This is still hooked up to our old system. So we set it up to where we could run our old system basically until the moment we were ready to use it when we switched over, leaving the old system in place, having a new system in place. So if there was also an issue, we could just unplug it and go back. And then once we've proven that this works very well over the course of a couple weeks, then we're going to decommission our old system and then switch out the final array and then turn that last array, that array D on.
And right now, how many? Well, you're not using that much, so you couldn't say how many kilowatt hours you're producing a day
exactly.
because it's a low time of year.
Exactly.
But the battery's charged up in how long?
Ooh,
40 minutes?
Yeah, a little less than 40 minutes.
40 minutes, yeah.
They went from what, 55% to 100% in under an hour?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About an hour.
Yeah.
So
Lots of storage.
there's big plans for this, including
Heat pumps, yeah.
including installing all the heat pumps that are over there. So a lot of work to do still. Part one.
Something that would have been helpful, at least for us, and maybe we can touch on here, is the idea if you have 2 of the inverters, the suggestion or the recommendation is that you need a AC combiner box, at least on the sketching is what was described to us, as well as a generator combiner box. So what we have, and there was really not a ton of details on that, so hopefully this is helpful. So there is, for our purposes here, so we have 2 60 amp, so double pole fuses, breakers. Yeah, 60 amp breakers that are here. I will say on the new diagram that just came out, they show this as 100 amp. So in any event, the old one was 60, and we're not reaching that amount anyway. But each one of these, so we have 4 gauge wire. Each one of these coming in for the AC combiner comes to from the load side here, which one you can show you, load 1 and 2 on
1 and 2 here.
Yeah.
And this one, this is our the non-master, and so the load 1 and 2 goes back through. We went through the metal portion of the conduit and up to the AC combiner box.
And the exact same thing on the master from load 1. Comes down, comes through, and here's our load 1. So essentially we're electrifying, if you will, this common bus bar. Then leaving here, we have the 4-aught aluminum coming out, and that's our service entry cable essentially going in. So the reason why we bought a bit of a larger breaker box here is we plan to have a EV, like a 240 EV plug, and maybe some other plugs out here, so we had a little bit more of expansion for this.
And one of the the reasons that it looks a little silly, we kind of mentioned these cables for a second, is in all the diagrams they draw the inverters directly next to each other. So in like a 4 system, they would be on battery 2 and 3 directly next to each other, and that if that's the case, these would reach. The reason that we didn't do that was to have a more balanced system across, so that way it wasn't 3 batteries closer to one inverter and then 2 batteries closer to one, and so that way the pull against all the batteries would be even. So we just ordered some new Cat 6 cable for this.
The last thing in the same vein here, if we close this, the exact same thing is true of the generator. So we have, I think it's a 43 amp generator. It's a Kohler generator. It's the identical setup right here. So we have 2 60 amp breakers coming in. We rated this, it's a little bit overkill, but for 4 gauge wire. It leaves under grid, under generator. There's a generator 1 and 2 off of the master. That comes down right into here. And then the exact same thing, generator 1 and 2 off of the secondary inverter that we have comes right in on this side. This will then leave here, which as Daniel had mentioned, we don't have yet because we still have the other system hooked up, and in case it gets cloudy, we have the generator ready to go. But this will leave here and go directly out to our generator.
I would say one of the things that I was really impressed with the system was the plug and play ability. And so like in kind of an afternoon or evening after our kid was asleep, I just came out here while you were at work and put on a headlamp and plugged all this in. And it has torque specificities and things, and I would say that I like have no experience with electrical work before. I still get volts and amps and watts all confused. And this was, I think, very straightforward to do. Understanding this wasn't Keith did all of this, but the actual like the plugging of the batteries and things, and then connecting the battery onto the cable onto the batteries is like really easy to use connection port that also keeps it safe. And it's like a quick connect port. So I actually thought this part was very impressively simple to do.
So this is the main PV disconnect, all 4 strings going up to the roof and over with LBs. Okay, we are on top of the roof. I think it's a 29-degree metal pitch roof. There's 30 of those Adani panels here.
The rail system was super easy to do, and the nice thing too is it didn't puncture our roof almost in any spot. So we were just connecting to this like raised rib portion.
Yeah, and the brand connector was S5, right?
Correct. Yeah, and yep, I really, again, we've never done another roofing system. We've never done rails. I'm sure it's real easy, but I think the amount of equipment you have, it sounds like at least, and the amount of cutting you have to do with railed systems sure is a bit more complicated, but from our standpoint, the Rail S through S5 was amazing. They sell kind of the footprint, which Daniel can show you here, of what goes. Yeah, exactly. These are size, so I believe this is a 4. So this is just a rib bracket. They go over this. You can measure this area. I think they have 1 through 4, 1 through 5, but they fit the size of each of the corrugated metal roofing here. They zip in. We only put 1 in this side and 1 this side because this is just literally to keep this off the roof here. But normally there's 2 on this side, 2 on this side. Then there is this pedestal basically, that tightens down to give you.
And there's
torque
a rubber
specification.
footing in there.
You can just barely see it to give it kind of like the waterproofing.
That's really what does the waterproofing. So.
Yeah. I mean, I was up here just with like a fanny pack, and those were my tools. It was a fanny pack, and the only reason I needed that was just to keep track of the screws, and then just swap out the drill bits. Because the drill bit for the bracket here, and then the drill bit for these are just different. And so that was the only thing. I was just swapping those back and forth. And if the panels were smaller, you could install it by yourself. The only reason that we needed a second person to be up here to help was just because the panels are just too big to maneuver by yourself.
Well, and you had a gigantic lift.
Yeah. We got a 50-foot boom.
We got some.
It was amazing
videos
because
and
it was just the 2 of us. We could have done this manually, but it made it so much easier, right? Having these, each one of these weighs about 60 pounds, which is fine, but you're on a 26-degree roof that we
with
had
a huge
and all that.
drop off.
Yeah, it's a pretty big drop.
2-story drop off.
Yeah.
So clearly you do the bottom panels first and
exactly.
work your way up.
We have pretty reasonable amount of climbing experience, so We used harnesses and all that stuff that you can imagine.
Which was nice when you're up here at 6 a.m. and it's slippery. You like all the dews on the roof and you're sliding everywhere. It was actually easier when it was hot.
Yeah, but in like we were telling Daniel, I think that the most labor, of course, part was putting the panels in ourselves, but it was the least complicated. It went very straightforward, and yeah, it just takes time.
But this went just in a few days.
Yeah.
Yeah.